Today I want to share a tool that we use here to help our disciples to define what church is biblically. Typically what I think most people would associate with church is a building that people would go to on Sunday mornings to listen to a pastor preach a sermon and maybe to sing some worship songs. The Greek word that is translated as church is ekklesia. And this word describes all of Jesus' followers as the people of God who show allegiance to their risen Lord and share together as God's children in the covenant privileges promised to them in the New Testament. And really is used in three different ways. One is in Matthew 16:18, where Jesus is talking to Peter, and he says, "And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it." So the first way is describing the universal church. Which really means all of God's people for all time, everywhere. And the second way is kind of teased out through the epistles, through the chapters 2 and 3 through in the book of Revelation, where it talks about written to the church in a city or a region. The church of Ephesus, the church of Galatia, the church of Sardis. It's not... it's the entire city and all of God's people that are in that city or in that region. And then finally, in Colossians 4, we find where Paul is writing to the church of Colossae. And in verse 15 it says, "Greet the brethren who are in Laodicea and Nymphas and the church that is in his house." So the last way is a church that meets in someone's home. So these are three ways that the Bible uses the word ekklesia to define what church is. Now, Jesus said that all of God's Old Testament commandments in Matthew 22 could be summarized with loving God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and loving others as you love yourself, and then he said that he would build his church and commissioned all of his disciples everywhere to teach their disciples, to make disciples, and to teach them to obey all that he has commanded. Now, spiritual families of disciples who actively try to love Jesus and obey his commands are the church. Although the church is often associated with buildings or pastors or staff members or budgets or programs like a Sunday morning service, the Bible describes the early church as the spiritual family of Christ, with Christ as a risen Lord in the center, because he's the head of the church, and who love God, who love others, and multiply disciples. Because God's original intent was for the church to be a multiplying movement and not an institution, we want to emphasize these simple biblical essentials that can easily multiply. Ekklesia, again, is not a building or the clergy or a program or a Sunday morning service. These things can be used for the meeting or the administration of the church, but they are not the biblical definition of church.